This is one of the few instances where I haven't had a chance to review a really good horror movie that came out because the following week another really good horror movie came out. Last week I saw Together, which was fantastic. It's a 4 out of 4 movie. And then this came out, which is also really, really wonderful. I am pretty convinced we're in a new great age of horror films because, man, I just feel like these two movies and then the Terrifier movies and the Smile movies, I just feel like we're constantly getting more and more good horror films that are very creative and very funny. They incorporate a fair amount of comedy into them as well, but they don't necessarily feel like sitcom-y or slapstick. I mean, we've seen stuff like, and there's no problem with these, like the Evil Dead movies and stuff where the gore is really over the top and silly, and it's like a Three Stooges cartoon and everything, and that's not what these are. That's not what this and Together are. And without going into spoilers, I'm not going to go into spoilers here. Both these movies also have this way of giving you a good setup and then kind of working backwards in terms of what is going on. And these are both fun movies to return to and then connect the dots of, oh, so that's what was happening. That's why that person did this earlier. And just the bare bones of this movie, because this is the same guy, was it Zach Cregger directed this. He also directed Barbarian, another great horror film. He produced, I guess, a movie called Companion, another great horror film. I mean, just all these great movies coming out. And the big thing about Barbarian is that everybody was saying, don't let anyone tell you anything about it. Same thing here. All you really need to know is just like what you see. Honestly, just in the teaser of this is all you need. I even think like the trailer itself doesn't give away a ton, but like maybe more than you probably want to know, at least that I kind of want to know going into this. So really all you need to know, and again, you can just read it on the poster, is that one night these kids just run out in the suburban town into the middle of the streets in the middle of the night, and they disappear. Nobody knows what happens to them, and they're all connected to this teacher's classroom. And they're trying to figure out what happened. And only one kid was there. There's only one kid that showed up to class and didn't run out into the middle of the night. And it's just following the people after that happened. Everyone's different. The teacher, one of the parents, one of the cops, and it keeps cutting to different people's reactions and the fallout of this event happening. And I won't say any more outside of that. I will say that for me, I guess you could say you can figure out kind of what's going on from the trailer. For me, it gave a little bit too much of a hint just in the opening. There's one little thing they show that I'm like, oh, okay, so it's going to be this kind of thing going on. Again, I won't give it away. But even when you know that, even when you figure that out, there's the question of why. There's the question of how. You get the what, but you don't really get the how and why, and that is slowly revealed throughout this movie. And like I said, it cuts to different characters and their points of view over just a couple of days, after this event happened, and you see how this event brings out the worst in these people. And what's interesting about that is that these are not bad people, but they clearly give into their weaknesses, into the stuff that they're really afraid of, and they'll get hostile, they'll make stupid choices, they'll not think straight, and they are completely identifiable. You know why they are doing these things. A lot of the people in this movie don't do very nice things or, again, very smart things, but you get why as you're watching them and you see them interact off each other, and you might even think, oh, that dude's an asshole, but then later you're going to see why he is that way, and you're going to put more of the pieces together. You're going to be like, all right, well, man, he still didn't act right, but boy, I see why this is going on. And this film is so good at doing that and showing how this event just really kind of trickles down and just sort of affects everybody really for the worst, and just the various ways that affects them. But it isn't just like a character study. This is a film that has some really good scares, some really good laughs. I'm not going to pretend this is a comedy. Together, I would say, is much more of a comedy. Even though there's very scary, intense, dramatic imagery in that too. but this one definitely has moments where you're supposed to laugh. And again, it doesn't feel like something out of a sitcom at all. It feels very much like just the situation is so insane. You almost don't know what else to do but to laugh. And whenever there was a funny moment, the crowd laughed. When a moment happens that's supposed to get a cheer, it got a cheer. It is gory. It is horrific. A lot of these moments. This is one of those movies where I love these kind of movies. This is why I'm really excited about horror films right now, is because they are incorporating a lot of comedy. When something is happening, you don't know if it's going to lead to a scream or a laugh, and I love that. I always say a lot of humor is, if not all humor, is based on misery. That's my personal assessment. A lot of people disagree. Every time somebody tries to bring up something and say, aha, well, what about this? I say, well, that's a mockery of this. That's insulting that. So I feel like I haven't been proven wrong yet about that. I could be at some point, but that's just what I've deduced. And I also find it interesting that a lot of comedians go into horror. There's certainly that crossover there, and there's even been articles written about why. And again, I think there is such a strong connection there, right down to it's a build-up to get a reaction out of you, an involuntary reaction. And I think it's fascinating that one is ha, H-A, and the other is ah, A-H. Literally the reverse. That shows how much crossover there is with them. So I do think the idea of incorporating a lot of comedy into horror, but again, very natural comedy, not something where it feels like it's out of nowhere, something where you just have to take in how bizarre and crazy this all is, and you have to laugh at it. I think it's very, very clever, and it does keep the tension high. And I think the build-up of it, whether you're building up to a joke or building up to a scare, is very, very similar. The idea of setting up a scenario and then delivering on something that's gonna, again, get this involuntary reaction. So with that said, the characters in this are all very interesting. You do feel for all of them. There's only one that I found... There's only one area in this... Actually, I take it back. There's two areas in this that are a touch boring. This is really a nitpick. One, I'm not going to say the character that I found a little boring, because if I do, it might give away something. But during this character's story, nothing scary happens. And the story is still good, and the character is written well and acted well and everything, but it was something where I'm watching this, and by the time I got to the end, I was like, yeah, I wasn't quite as invested in that one as I was the others, and I realized nothing scary happened in it, so I think that's the issue with that. The only other issue I'll point to, where I started to get a little bored, is in the last third, again, without going into spoilers, they reveal what's going on. They reveal mostly how it's going on, but they kind of do a Hateful Eight where they show you, while everything else was happening, what was going on during that time. I think most people have put together how it works and most of the details and everything, so it's more getting to just get to the why a little faster. And it's not like Hateful Eight where it's like you're there for 45 minutes and you don't need to be. That movie just tagged on a whole fourth act for no reason. It's not like this at all. In fact, it actually is very well paced. If I saw this moment or this stretch of time on its own, I'd be like, this is very well edited and put together. It's just because it's coming off of these other stories that are also very well put together and very, very suspenseful and very scary, and like I said, even comedic. And you definitely do have sympathy for these characters and what they're going through. And again, just how this event just really destroyed them in so many ways, and how they're trying to find something to grab onto, and which is just figuring out what the hell happened and the lengths these various people will go to and why they're going to these lengths to figure it out. And I think you can read a fair amount into that. Originally, when I saw this, again, I won't give away the ending, but I thought the ending was maybe a little too quick. And then when I really thought about everything that happened and the misery these characters went through and the cause of it, I said, nah, actually, this does kind of make sense. I feel like this should kind of be the ending. The only other thing, again, it's a total nitpick, is that some of the characters don't put two and two together like they should. There's a lot of little things dropped in all over the place that's gonna come in later, and you're gonna be asking, why did that happen? Oh, that's why. Okay, they show it at another time. But there's still some things where I go, a teacher wouldn't notice that, a cop wouldn't notice that, a detective wouldn't pick up on that. There's a few moments like that where I say, okay, I'm giving a little bit of leeway, but I needed a little bit more than just, oh, they just didn't notice. I'm like, nah, when you have investigators and cops, and this is a big event that just got the whole town looking at this. I mean, how many like true crime stories are there, and internet detectives and sleuths and stuff like that would just be totally focused on this? I mean, like, people would notice some things in this. But again, that's a real nitpick, and you have to really be paying attention to be like, well, wait, why didn't they do that? Why didn't they notice? Yada, yada. So, yeah, I'm more and more becoming a big fan of this guy's work, this Zach Cregger guy. Like I say, he did Barbarian, he produced Companion, which I also greatly enjoyed. And my brother said, because he never even heard of this movie, and I just said, wait, he directed this movie Barbarian. I told him a little bit about it, and he directed this. I told him a little bit about it. He says, oh, so what Shyamalan used to be? I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good, actually. This is pretty much, this is, I think, only, in terms of these big horror films, I think this is only film 2 for him. But again, only for this style. I think he's done other films before it. So maybe he'll go downhill after that. I don't know. But, because that's kind of what happened with Shyamalan, in my humble opinion, but I do like Shyamalan. There's a lot of stuff I really enjoy. Even when he's bad, he's great. So I'll say that if these films do end up, starting to go downhill after this, I guess they're guaranteed to at least be entertaining or at least interesting. But yeah, so far, this is one of the few directors out there where he can just set up very little. No, you know what? I was wrong. It wasn't M. Night Shyamalan. That was my comparison. I said that. Rob says what J.J. Abrams used to be. That is a better comparison. Except I think with Abrams, a lot of the time, he couldn't fall through on the endings and the outcome. He's kind of famous for it. But he's great at building it up and wanting you to shout, what is going on? And this guy is good at that too. And he's also good at setting up a scenario where everyone just overwhelmingly does not want to tell you what's going on. They don't want to tell you anything about it. They're like, just go in completely blind. That's the best way to do it. And they are correct. This is a very good movie for that. One of the actresses, I'm not going to say her name just in case you don't recognize who it is. And this isn't like a huge name, but she is an actress you've seen in other stuff. And I did not know who this was until the very end. My friend told me, and I went, oh, holy smokes. Okay, and I did not recognize her, and she does a great job. Benedict Wong does a really great job in this. I only knew him from, Doctor Strange. And he was fine in that. He did a good job, but I think in this one, he really does a great job. Again, you just really sympathize with everybody and what they're going through and how they're trying to balance everything. And when they do lose their cool, you get it. You understand why. Brolin, again, is great. I'm just looking at like all the actors here who did such a good job here. Everyone really comes through in the acting department, and they're all written very interestingly, where there wasn't that many moments where I felt like this is dead weight, or, oh, do we have to focus on this character? Like I said, the only one I got a little dull around is the one where nothing scary happened in the story. But even I acknowledge, character's still written very well and still very interesting. A lot of interesting stuff happens in the story. It's just everything else was set up so good at having these good scares and these good creepy visuals, and this great build-up, that when it doesn't deliver on a scare, I go, that was lacking a little bit. But yeah, I don't really want to go too much into spoilers, so I don't think there's too much else to say about it. Again, I guess I thought at the end, without going into too much, is that I wish there was a little bit more detail originally I was thinking of. I was kind of checking with my friend, like, So this happened, this was occurring when that was occurring, but did they explain this? Did they go into detail about that? He was like, no, not really. And again, I was driving home kind of thinking that was a problem, and then I was, again, kind of connecting a few dots together. I was like, maybe I didn't need to know this information. Maybe it was better a little vague, and I kind of had to connect a few things going on. And again, it makes me want to watch it again to see if I do like it a little better. And again, that did kind of tie into the ending a little bit too. But as I was driving home, I'm like, no, I think something's actually, this is clicking better the more I think about it. So yeah, I guess for me, it really is very difficult to make me scared watching a horror film. I don't really jump at jump scares. I can acknowledge when something is scary, that's a creepy image. I could be like, ooh, like that got under my skin. But in terms of like, jumping, screaming, anything like that, very, very few horror films do that. There's a few moments where I can't say I jump, but my heart did skip a beat. There's some good moments like that. There's some really creepy imagery. And again, there's that great suspense of what is going to happen. Am I going to laugh at this scene or am I going to scream in terror, kind of thing? Or at the very least, is the crowd going to scream in terror? Because again, I'm not really a screamer when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, to get so many films like that now, so many horror films that are really standing out. And I mean, to a point where, like I said, back to back, I had two really good ones that I couldn't talk about the other go. I guess this is kind of a half review of Together as well, because a lot of them have the same critique, but they're not the same movie. They both have their own unique identity and their own great style. And yeah, I just really think we're in a good age of horror films right now. We're just getting a lot of good ones. And everyone, I feel like, for a long time has said, yeah, their horror films aren't really scary. You kind of watch them for the camp value and just to watch the tropes happen. Just kind of the typical slasher film stuff where they just say the goofy lines and we laugh at wanting to see the people die and everything. But these horror films right now are doing what they're supposed to do. They're bringing up interesting ideas. They are scary. They're very entertaining. You care about the people. You legit don't want to see them die. It does, I feel like, what originally horror films are supposed to do, and not this sort of thing, which is fine, where you're laughing at the camp and waiting for the characters to get, killed off. With this, you legit feel bad when somebody gets killed off, and you want to know what the mystery is. You want to figure out what's going on, and you're afraid for everybody in it. There's definitely little callbacks to other horror films in this, but they're not distracting necessarily. They're just kind of a nice little wink. If you haven't even seen these horror films, you wouldn't even notice it, but there are a few nice little callbacks there. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I had a really good time with this movie. I was debating whether or not to give it 3.5 or 4. Together, I would definitely give 4. That's like a really, really great movie. With this one, for now, I'll say 3.5, only because I did just see Together, and I'm also thinking of Sinners, what a great horror film that was and stuff. I mean, that's a 4 out of 4 movie. Nothing really felt like it was being changed or expanded upon in terms of like what a horror movie is. It's just done really, really well. So to some, that would be a 4 out of 4 movie. But again, I might have to sit a little bit with what the film is doing. Maybe go back and see it again. I'm probably going to see it again this weekend and, take a few people to see it and really think about if what it's, I don't want to say saying because that sounds very pretentious, but what it's trying to accomplish is done better the second time, which is not to say it wasn't done well the first time. It's done very, very well, but is it working at a level I wasn't even really aware of now that I know where it's going to go? So with that said, without going into spoilers, if you've seen this movie, what do you think? Do you think it was fantastic and this is one of the best scary movies of the year? And by God, this guy just, keeps knocking them out of the park and I can't wait for more? Or do you think it was terrible and the payoff was so lame and you don't like how sometimes the characters weren't that bright, you didn't like cutting up the story, seeing the different points of view and everything? Or are you somewhere in between where you go, you know what, this was a pretty creepy, fun time. I didn't need anything else on top of that. I just had some good laughs, some good scares, and that's all I needed. Let me know what you think. I'll see you next time. Take care.